open banking and fintech collaborative partnerships. So we have, we will have a session with two people. I believe there's supposed to be three. But first of all, I would like to just take a quick check at our presenters in case they are here now. Do we have Shriyan Lakani? Shriyan? Do we have Ulrich? Ulrich Tobias or Tobias? Okay. But I believe we have from Paymentology, earlier on we had Madam Kristen. So for this for session 9, which is panel discussion, we're going to have first Mr. Julius Abuje, who is Business Development Lead, East Africa from Paymentology. Can we have a round of applause to Mr. Julius Abuje, please, as he makes his way to the stage for our next panel discussion. A round of applause to Mr. Julius, please. This will make us wake up a little bit, okay? Yes, and we also have from DTB, from Diamond Trust Bank, we have Madam Janet Daly, who is Head of Partnerships, Ecosystems, and Fintech Strategy. Just the right person. Digital and Innovation. Madam Janet, let's have a round of applause for Madam Janet as she makes her way to the stage, please. A bigger one, a bigger one, a bigger one. Yeah, so we will use the same style that we were using early on. We'll have the questions, just a few questions for them, for open banking and fintech collaborative partnerships. And then after that, we will head straight to the questions, because this is all about you. Do we have Mr. Emmanuel Kimaro? Mr. Emmanuel Kimaro? Oh, he's not here yet. So we'll have these two, and ever presently, I will be your moderator. From Diamond Trust, early on we had a gentleman from NMB, and people asked a lot of questions about other issues. But we also had a gentleman from Kenya who talked about open banking and how it has not been, accepted very much in Africa already, but we have started it here in Tanzania. So with regard to open banking and fintech collaborative partnerships, we have fintech companies here today. How do you think they can benefit from open banking, and how aware do you think they are with regard to how those benefits are important to them, or how they can get those benefits? So how beneficial is open banking, especially to fintech companies that are here? What can they live with when they're thinking about open banking, and how, maybe giving examples from your bank, how can that benefit them?
Right. Hi, everyone. That's an interesting question. So back home, in Nairobi, open banking is still highly unregulated. So definitely it's a case-by-case basis, and definitely because it doesn't yet fit in the regulation of especially banking and fintech associations, it is not highly adopted. Okay, but that said, open banking is one of the ways to actually drive innovation within Africa. However, everything has building blocks, right? Even if, and when you think about open banking in the true sense of the word, and I'd like to actually make sure that we are clear on that, in the true sense of the word, open banking is basically, as Diamond Trust Bank, giving a third party access to your account information, right? And a lot of things have started being done. For instance, in Kenya, we have DPA 2022, which is being looked at from ODPC, and I believe those are some of the groundwork that is being put in place so that we can get into open banking in the true sense of the word. However, even before that happens, what is it that banks are doing to facilitate fintech innovation in Kenya? It doesn't mean that we don't have fintechs in Kenya or East Africa specifically, right? We do have them. But what it is that we are doing to ensure that they're able to operate within that environment. So one of the things that we do, and it is basically riding on our weakness to make it a strength, is that because we are highly regulated, we basically sit and stand in between the regulator and the fintech, which then makes it easier for fintechs to actually, innovate around the regulation as it sits. Because one of the things that is easy to do, I'm not saying innovation is easy. Innovation in itself may be easy to achieve. However, the moment you start putting the constraints of what needs to be looked at before you achieve that innovation, that's when complication comes in. And that's where banks are playing a big role. So even before we get to a point where it is easy for me to say as a bank or as a financial institution, that here is an API that you can pull Dali's information and basically do activity XYZ. Before it gets to that, what other frameworks am I putting in place that ensure that when that time comes, you're able to do it seamlessly, right? So that is, those are some of the things that banks are actually doing, ensuring they're bridging the gap between the fintech and the regulator, ensuring they're bridging the gap between the fintech and the market, because sometimes you actually need the wheels to get into that market. You probably need access to my market before you can be able to validate your concept, right? So some of those things, advisory, business intuition and business, governance. So most of those things that any fintech needs that is not at the forefront of innovation. It is there, but it usually is not at the forefront of innovation. When you want to solve for a problem, you don't first sit and say, okay, I want to solve for a digital problem, but first, what's going to happen on regulation? You solve for it first, and then now you think, how do I go back and now marry it to regulation? So to separate that two, you let the people who need to worry about regulation, figure out what is DPA looking at. Like for instance, if you think about Kenya, in the last 2 weeks alone, we've had almost 3 circulars from our regulator around POCAMLA and AML. And I'm 100% sure if I was to do a small census with the fintechs that I'm currently supporting, I'm 100% sure that less than 10% have seen those circulars or bothered to read and understand what it actually means to their business. So my job is to read, understand what does that means for, in terms of impact to their business, and communicate it to them, and not just say, here is a problem, but here is a problem, but this is our recommended solution. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I believe members of the floor will have more questions on that. But moving to Mr. Julius Aboye. There's a challenge with new technologies that come to Africa. Giving example of Tanzania here, there's a lot of people who, whenever something new is started, unless it resembles something that was there, like a few years back or recently, people tend to be afraid of starting it. And most of the times, they will wait for somebody else to start it before they go ahead and do it. And some of the challenges that they talk about is the understanding of their clients, maybe sometimes, or the understanding of the people that will be taking part in those kind of things. So can you please tell us some of the other challenges that you think are hindering partnerships between fintech and like fintech collaborative partnerships in terms of open banking? Do you think there are other challenges, and how do you think we can go around them? If you can mention a few, because I know this will be a very, very huge topic, but if, like the common ones, what are the biggest challenges that people are facing, especially fintech companies, and how do you think we can go around them so they can, benefit from this technology?
Right. Thanks for that. So that's a very interesting question, because all the time here, people have been talking up here, it's always been about data. Because data is actually the new currency. Because right now, the way everything is set up, and as Jalet, you were trying to allude to earlier, it's all about data. What information do I have about this individual? And so when you look at open banking and fintechs and the whole opportunities for collaboration between fintechs and banks, there has to be somewhat of a standardization of the data that these fintechs are actually going to get from the banks. Now, secondly, if you look at the problems that most fintechs face, and the problem is if you come up with a new product and you're actually not solving a problem, then you don't really expect much uptake, because what you're doing is replacing, you're not solving. And for you to be able to get uptake in terms of clientele, you have to be able to solve for a specific problem for your end users. Now, having said that, I still think there are numerous opportunities between banks and fintechs. And one of the opportunities that, as you said, that I think is the biggest opportunity for banks and fintechs is to have somewhat of an understanding that as a fintech, this is the data that you're going to get from the bank. And as Paymentology, we do have secure APIs. And through our secure APIs, we should be able to provide somewhat of a data standardization on data sharing between fintechs and banks. And through this, then, the regulatory aspect, which is the biggest hindrance for fintechs when they want to launch these very innovative, very nice products for their clientele. It's always about the law, and it's always about how do we ensure that as much as we want to solve this particular problem, we are also compliant. Look across Africa. So many fintechs have run into so many problems because of compliance, but they have banks as partners. The easiest way to get through that is by having banks to provide the regulatory aspect service, or if you may, advice. And then fintechs can come in with their innovative changing of the world ideas. And then through that, you're able to actually navigate through the regulatory problem. And then at the end of the day, if you're solving a problem, you definitely get clientele and you're able to scale.
All right. I think that was well understood. If to solve a problem, you have to make sure that you're first ready to solve the problem. You want to solve the problem, and then maybe other things, as Madame here also talked about. You can go ahead with other things with regard, because if you have an organization, let's say, there are other people who will be dealing with the legal matters. There are people who will be dealing with regulation. There are people who will be doing marketing and other things. But if you have a fintech, then maybe this is high time that you start by yourself with proceeding. So thank you very much, both of you, for wonderful answers. But before I allow you to go, I think this is the time that we have always been waiting for. Questions from members of the floor who would love to know more about this topic. So for those who have questions, please. We're talking about open banking and fintech collaborative partnerships. If we have any questions from members of the floor, we must have questions, because this is the high part of the panel discussion. It's about us and our questions. So we have one there. Do we have another one? Another question before I add mine. Another question? Up there, we'll have another question. Do we have another question? Question 3. 1, 2. Another question this side? Right. We'll take the first 2.
Yeah. Good evening, and it was a wonderful discussions. My name is Praveen. I'm the CEO of a company known as Safe Software, which gives solutions to banking and fintech institutions globally. So my question is basically, I would like to, you mentioned about open banking and how much the big banks in Tanzania is supporting the fintechs to be in the front end, okay, to offer different type of products and services in a better way. So is it like, they are very much open, or do they feel that, the fintechs can take up their customers? So I just want to know about how, I presume you're from the banking background because I just came late. So how is the feeling, and how much you are really open to that? Thank you.
Okay, the second question. So we'll take all the questions and then we'll be answering them one by one.
Hi, my name is Habib. I'm the CEO and founder of Mkobo in Nigeria. So my question is not particularly related to open banking, but we spoke a lot about compliance. And one example, or one thing I would like to understand, it's sometimes innovation moves quicker than regulation. So, for example, now we're talking about digital currency, cryptocurrency, and things like that. And I remember last year when there was an issue with foreign currency in Nigeria, the central bank blamed crypto for one of the problems that was causing the issue. So, in this regard, what role then does the regulation play in terms of trying to catch up with innovation to ensure that fintechs are compliant or they are regulated, basically?
Very much, sir. Another question?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine from Kenya. I'm the CEO of a payment company called PesaSwap, and I also sit in the board of the Association of Fintechs in Kenya. My question is very similar to the founder of Mkopo there. It's about the regulation aspect in terms of open banking. So I just wanted to know how involved are the banks when it comes to defining the regulation frameworks that fintechs must run through in order to be compliant, and how open is it for the banks to do this regionally? Because Janet, I see you sit in a bank that has quite a good presence in Africa. So in short, my motivation is guided by the fact that if DTB gives me a yes in Kenya, how complex is it for DTB to give me the same yes in Tanzania, Uganda, etc., provided that it's still the same framework within the same bank?
Thank you. If we can have another, just one question before we proceed with the answers. All right, so we'll answer those first. All right, so Madam, I think you'll start because most, if not all, the questions were directed to you, but the gentleman here also will add on to those questions, okay? Okay, so I think you have the questions, or I can return them to you. How much are the big banks supporting fintechs? And maybe if I can add, how do they choose which ones to, you know, to support? Is there anything that is there like a technique that you can give to these fintech companies here? So how much are banks supporting the fintechs?
Okay, that's an interesting question, but I'd like to get your permission to actually speak for my bank, because it will become very hard for me to speak for other banks, okay? So, so first I'll start by just looking at support. There's a lot of expectation when you talk about support, when you talk about how do banks support fintechs. And in the first place, banks, specifically my bank, had to go back and define what is it that we want to do in terms of supporting fintechs, okay? So when you look at the framework, how fintechs work and how banks work, you'd understand that totally different in terms of approach, not in terms of what they're doing in the market, in terms of approach. So you have, and I'll tell you, for instance, most of the fintechs that come before me, the first thing they tell me is, I want access to your customer base, okay? I want to do, I have this brilliant idea that I'm serving merchants, and I want these merchants, I want your merchants, you know, to basically come onto my platform, okay? So if you think about it, and I'm glad there are so many fintechs here, if you think about it, how many fintechs today in the market provide services to merchants, right? You'd find it's not just one, there are many. So if I go the way of saying, okay, come, let's create a support structure for you to serve my customers who can become merchants on your platform, I've locked out all the rest, haven't I? And then the next person who comes will say, banks are not supportive of fintechs. So there is the support where, and this is where I always say, when you look at my role, I clearly want to define there is a vendor and then there is a partner. So as a fintech, when you're approaching a bank, you be very clear what you're asking for. Because if you're asking for support as a vendor, you're going to be dished the approach of a vendor. If you're asking for support as a partner, which basically means as a bank, you've been doing XYZ. I've just started doing ABC. Give me support. Give me your rails. Give me access to your regulator. Get me approved to do this. Give me the right tools I need to run in this particular market. Give me advice. Work with me this journey, right? And then once I'm done with that, with giving you all these things, because it will never be done, it's a partnership. Once that is done, you're actually in a better place than when you come to me and tell me, let me serve your customers, okay? Because I have to take you through an RFP process. Does that make sense? So for my bank specifically, now that we've cleared the support thing, the bank actually sat down and took an entire 360-degree turn to this particular conversation. Are we going to support fintechs? Are we going to tell them, come to our branches, open accounts, and then because that is a type of support. So the bank actually took a strategic decision, put it in its strategy for the next 5 to 10 years, that we are going to have a platform. And by a platform, I don't mean a technological platform. It's actually a business platform. We're going to brand it. We're going to resource it. We're going to have people who are going to work in software engineering, data analytics, cloud, digital partnerships, and digital banking, etc. And these whole people, their job is one: partner with fintechs. Put them in a particular place where they're going to work with you, and you're going to work with them, and you're going to make them flourish in this market, right? That is what my bank did. My bank is DTB, and what I'm talking about is called Astra. So if you go to your phones right now, on LinkedIn, you'll see Astra. And this is a proposition that was set intentionally because the bank then decided we cannot be guessing. We cannot say we will wait for PesaSwap today to come, and then tomorrow it's Paymentology. We will wait for them. We will actually make solutions. And I'm actually happy that I'm sharing the stage with one of my key partners. We are going to sit down and make solutions for these fintechs. We're going to understand their business. We're going to understand what they need to do to actually flourish in the market. We're going to know the pitfalls, because remember, banks are built on trust. Banks are built on trust. So the first thing they do is assess risk. And right now, I'm sorry to say, but fintech is risky business. In the last 6 months, you would attest quite a number of fintechs that were well capitalized. I'm not talking about the small fintechs that just started yesterday and couldn't validate their concept. I'm talking about fintechs that went ahead and got quite the good funding and capitalization to run in this market, and they folded up. If anyone is looking at risk, that makes that business risky, very risky. So if we are going to do this, banks have to first get over the risk. And the only way to get the risk is, what do? You get to know your customer. You get to understand what they do, how they do it, when they do it, and how it is that you can facilitate them doing it. So that 5 years down the line, your list, the people you're supporting, the people you're working on, are not in the list of folding up, because you saw it coming. And you had to help them pivot. You had to help them change strategy. You had to ask the right questions, right? So we need to do this. We have to do it intentionally. So that, I don't know if that answers the first question.
I believe it does. There's a follow-up question, but first let's answer all the questions that we have here. The innovations, okay, there's a gentleman from Nigeria there. He says, innovation moves quicker than regulations, and we know the regulators. We know who are making these regulations as well, and how positive they are about technology and technological advancements. So what's the role of regulations in all this, and how can we comply to it or deal with it?
Interesting. I don't know if any of you has ever had this statement that when you're looking to buy property or when you're looking to move to a new house, wait for when it's raining. Has anyone ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and this perhaps, it's my brothers and sisters in the room would relate to this. Because when it's dry, every estate looks good. But when it starts to rain, that's when you know which houses flood, which houses have, the roof is not well done, or the roads to where you're buying, are not well done. Okay? So that is exactly what regulation is. If you expect regulation to come before innovation, I'm sorry, that will never happen, because you cannot start anticipating. That is what is risk management. Risk management is anticipating the problems and saying, this is how you need to mitigate them. But where you're managing risk, you're not necessarily setting up regulation. It's after the risk management has gone before and it has understood what those risks are, which ones can get mitigated to an extent, which ones impact are higher than the others, and where it is that you need to clearly stipulate how people need to address those particular risks, and that is regulation. So you cannot go before. There's nowhere that regulation went before the innovation. So when you talk about open banking, for instance, if you look at the journey, even let's take a different market like the European market. If you look at the journey before regulation all the way to when now there are rules and now it's a product, it's something that can be done openly. If you look at that journey, there were a lot of steps that were taken, and I'm sure when they were being taken, the market wasn't feeling that these steps are actually leading to open banking. So we had GDPR, for instance, right? We had a lot of fintech regulation being tightened up. There was a clear demarcation between an e-money issuer, an EMI, and a money transfer body within a certain location. So all of these things were being done so that when you now say it's okay for you to access someone's data, to build a certain proposition, etc., at that point, all these are the rules that you need to have adhered to. Now, that said, as much as innovation comes before regulation, regulation is also sometimes very slow. So we do agree with you. Even as players in this particular market, we do understand and appreciate the fact that sometimes it's very slow. But nothing has ever moved without proper agitation. So if you guys, I don't know, if you look at, for instance, the Kenyan market, when you think about digital lenders, right? For a very long time, there was no regulation around them, right? And even PSPs, it took Safaricom doing what it was doing around M-Pesa for that regulation to actually be cast on, you know, and taken to market. Same thing for DLAC. It took the people in that particular industry to agitate, to keep talking, and I know a few of them in that particular industry who talk to the regulator on a very, on almost a day-to-day basis. And it took them to convince the regulator that it's not about the business, it's about the customer. And they did that by demonstrating, actually they're doing wonderful things. One of the things I know they're working on is basically creating, someone asking in a previous session, how do you know that someone has borrowed from Dali and Julius, and how do you ensure that that person is protected and Dali and Julius are protected? DLAC is already doing that. They're working on a solution that basically makes all digital lenders create a global limit so that you're not over-indebted, right? I'm 100% sure that possibly would not have come about if regulation hadn't been agitated enough to be done. So while it is moving slow, the small things we are doing, and I'll repeat this, what we are doing with Astra is possibly one of the things that will also agitate the market. If there is a bank that is standing on behalf of the fintechs and saying, I am willing to talk on behalf of fintech X because I have looked at them, I have assessed their risk, I've assessed their business practices, I've assessed their business concept, and I've validated their concept. And I'm coming to you as my regulator, please approve for me to work with them, and here is proof of what I'm doing. It will only take, okay, maybe 50. Okay, maybe a good number. It will take a good number, but sooner or later, even the people who are reviewing those requests will finally sit and say, okay, maybe we need to open it up. It's also getting tedious for us to keep reviewing these things. Let's reduce the number of things we are reviewing. I don't know if that actually makes sense.
Yeah, I think it actually makes sense, and even better if the people involved in making the regulations are chosen according to how flexible they are in discussing technological matters. Because the only problem is, let's say you put a regulation today, it's November 2023, and then there's a vast change in technology in like March 2024, and then there are things that are not going hand in hand with what open banking is doing, and no, they are not going hand in hand with open banking, with regulations, but they are good in open banking, and then they have to sit down for another 1, 2, 3 years to just discuss that because they just got from discussing that, and maybe that can be the challenge. But this leads us to the third question as well. You have said how involved the fintechs are, but there was another question, or how involved the fintechs can be. What about the banks? So someone asked, are the banks involved in defining the regulations? And I think she was from your country as well, saying how involved are you in making sure that the regulations are working better for the fintechs and other companies as well? And how often are you involved? Is it most of the times? Is it just sometimes? But also she gave an example of how a person from Kenya who is doing open banking but can come to Tanzania and proceed with activities in fintech or any other sector as a matter of fact. So how involved are the banks? You can give an example of your bank as well.
Okay. Where regulation is concerned, of course, banks don't necessarily have the front seat. They're controlling us. I mean, if we have the front seat, every regulation will be advantageous to us, right? They are our control. So the most they do, they actually get advice from, from the market. The first thing, and I'm not so sure about other regulators, but at least the East African regulators, I know they do quite a bit of public, not barazas, what is that? Yeah? Yes, public participation. For instance, a few months ago, there was one for crypto, for digital currency. Let me not say crypto, for digital currency in Kenya. So they get, because the forefront of their delivery is actually the consumer and not the bank. Because if you give the bank the forefront, our pricing will be what makes us, make us money without necessarily you guys. So it has to be, if you're controlling someone, it has to be the consumer. But however, I was talking to my regulator, and while of course it was about specific fintechs that I'm seeking approval for, it's also a discussion. It's reached a point where we actually, in the last session, where they were actually now telling us how it is that they feel we've addressed, XYZ, and now, because now they, from our asks specifically, they understood our asks, and we felt that that is basically a very good breakthrough for exactly the business that we want to do. So we may not necessarily get the seat of where the law is being passed, but we influence it. We influence it by the things we have to go and request for approvals for. We influence it by the kind of decisions we request them to help us make. We influence it by the new products that we launch together with you guys. Because the moment they realize that this is a partnership, we are collaborating to solve for XYZ, that changes view. They don't view you like a vendor. And quickly they start grasping, okay, so this is how this is innovating. You're solving for 1, you're solving for 2, you're solving for 3 problems. And this is another competitor. Oh, and they're doing this and that. And I remember in one of the fintech events, there was a regulator present, a representative of the regulator present, who said to one of the fintechs who are presenting something, and he told them, please come on Monday, come see me, let's talk. I want to understand what you're doing. So it's not that they're not giving us a place, but sometimes where the regulator is concerned, right now we are all looking at POCAMLA with AML and liquidity issues. I mean, they're also busy. If you don't ask, you don't get. So if we don't go to them, they probably wouldn't come to us.
Well, thank you very much. But I would thank you very much for those precise answers. I would just like to go, so we can finalize, I would just like to go back to Mr. Julius. In case there's anything you want to add, or in case there was anything interesting from your point of view that you wanted to add from these questions before we wind up. How much big banks are supporting the fintechs, but also with regard to how regulations can at least try to cope with the technological innovations that we are having, and perhaps a little bit about how banks are involved as well.
All right, thanks. I think from my standpoint, it's pretty simple. It's true that law follows innovation, but from what I've seen across East African countries is that there is a new crop up of regulatory sandbox environments. And what this does is that it gives you as a fintech, gives you as a business an opportunity to be able to have a proof of concept. You're actually able to understand your customer needs and you're able to come up with a solution. And this solution will then go to market. Now, what it does in the meantime is that it also gives the regulator an opportunity to see and actually see in real life, in real time, what you're trying to do. And the moment across East Africa, we are going to have more and more of these regulatory sandbox. I mean, in Kenya, we have the CAK regulatory sandbox. We also have other regulatory sandbox that are coming up. And it's very important for us, and for us who are in this very exciting space, to utilize these opportunities to be able to provide a proof of concept, provide an understanding to the regulator, so that when they finally have an opportunity to either up, then they do it from an informed position. I think that's all I would want to add on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That is about all the time that we have, and I think we've exploited even more than the time that we were allocated. But I would just like to take this opportunity to thank again Madam Janet Daly from Diamond Trust Bank, but also Mr. Julius Abuje from Paymentology for giving us these insights on open banking and fintech collaborative partnerships. I believe we are still here, and maybe we'll still be here tomorrow, so that people, if they have further questions, they can come back to you. Can we have another round of applause for Mr. Julius and Madam Janet Daly as they exit the stage, please? Thank you very much. Thank you.